Have you ever wondered why most people work harder every year yet feel more tired, more rushed, and more dissatisfied with life? Why the promise we were sold? Study well, get a good job, work long hours, and finally enjoy life someday rarely delivers the happiness it advertises. From childhood, we are trained to accept a normal life script without questioning it. Wake up early, commute, sit in an office for hours, chase promotions, wait for weekends, and postpone freedom until retirement. This routine feels so familiar that it becomes invisible, and anything invisible is rarely questioned. The truth is uncomfortable. Most people are not stuck because they are incapable or lazy. They are stuck because they never pause long enough to ask whether the rules they are following actually make sense. Society rewards busyness, not effectiveness. Working late is praised while working smart is often misunderstood. People confuse motion with progress. They fill their days with emails, meetings, and tasks. But at the end of the week, month, or year, they feel like they are running in place. This system survives on fear. Fear of instability, fear of judgment, fear of stepping outside what feels safe and approved. So people trade their best hours, their health, and their creativity for the illusion of security. They accept stress as normal, exhaustion as a badge of honor, and delayed happiness as a fair deal. Over time, this script shapes identity. A person doesn't just do a job, they become the job. And once identity is tied to work, escaping the system feels like losing oneself. But here's the hidden problem. The traditional path assumes that time must be sacrificed first and life can be enjoyed later. It assumes that freedom is a reward, not a design choice. It teaches people to save joy for weekends, relationships for holidays, and dreams for retirement. Yet no one guarantees that later will arrive with the health, energy, or desire to enjoy it. Waiting becomes a habit and life quietly slips by in the background. The most dangerous part of the normal life script is that it discourages experimentation. It tells people to follow proven paths instead of designing personal ones. It convinces them that deviation equals irresponsibility. But progress in any field has never come from blindly following existing rules. It comes from questioning assumptions, removing unnecessary steps, and redesigning systems that no longer serve human well-being. When you step back and observe carefully, you realize something powerful. Long hours are often a substitute for clarity. People work more not because the work demands it, but because they haven't defined what truly matters. Without clear priorities, everything feels urgent. Without boundaries, work expands endlessly. And without intention, life becomes a series of reactions rather than conscious choices. This is where the real shift begins. Not with quitting jobs or chasing fantasies, but with awareness. Awareness that the default path is optional. Awareness that productivity is not about doing more but about doing what matters. Awareness that time is the only non-renewable resource we ever spend. Once you see the illusion clearly, you can never unsee it. But before we begin, I highly recommend wearing your earphones cause when you watch a video, then you're just only consuming visuals. But when you listen, then your brain starts working to understand the deeper meaning of the content. And trust me, the visuals created inside your mind are 10 times more powerful than visuals you see on a screen. Most people believe wealth is measured by how much money you earn, the size of your house, or the brand of car you drive. But what if that definition itself is flawed? What if money by itself has very little value unless it buys you freedom? This is where the idea of two very different types of people begins to appear. Those who defer life and those who design it. Deferred life thinkers live with a dangerous assumption. I'll enjoy life later. They sacrifice time today for a promise tomorrow. Long hours now for comfort later. Stress now for peace later. Dreams now postponed for retirement later. On the surface, this sounds responsible, but underneath it hides a quiet gamble that health, energy, curiosity, and opportunity will still exist in the future exactly when you want them. Most people never question this bet. They simply inherit it. The new rich think differently. They don't see wealth as a number in a bank account. They see it as control. Control over time, location, and choices. To them, money is only useful when it supports life, not when life revolves around money. They are less impressed by status and more interested in freedom. They don't ask, how much can I earn? They ask, how little can I work while still living well? This shift completely changes behavior. Deferred life thinkers chase promotions, titles, and approval. They tolerate environments they dislike because they believe suffering now is the price of success. The new rich focus on results, not appearances. They care less about looking busy and more about being effective. They design systems that create income without constant presence, because they understand a simple truth. If your income depends entirely on your time, your freedom will always be limited. Another key difference lies in how both groups treat time. Deferred life thinkers trade time for money without hesitation, assuming time is abundant and money is scarce. But time is the only resource that never comes back. The new rich protect time fiercely. They are willing to earn less if it means gaining more control over their days. They understand that a smaller income with freedom often creates more happiness than a larger income with chains. The idea of someday is the most dangerous word in the deferred life mindset. Someday I'll travel. Someday I'll focus on health. Someday I'll spend more time with family. Someday becomes a storage box where dreams are quietly buried. The new rich replace someday with now. Not recklessly but intentionally. They create mini retirements instead of waiting for one final escape at the end of life. This doesn't mean living irresponsibly or rejecting ambition. It means redefining ambition. Instead of climbing endlessly, the new rich optimize. They remove unnecessary complexity. They question why things are done a certain way. They don't wait for permission to live well. They understand that happiness delayed is happiness denied. Once you see this contrast clearly, it becomes impossible to unsee. You start noticing how often society rewards sacrifice without questioning its purpose. You begin asking yourself a different kind of question. Not how successful do I look, but how free do I feel? And that single question has the power to change the direction of an entire life. Most people build their lives around work, not the other way around. They choose a career first, then try to squeeze happiness, health, relationships, and freedom into whatever time is left. And when life feels empty or exhausting, they assume the problem is motivation, that they need to push harder, stay disciplined, or wait longer. But the real problem is much deeper. The problem is that the structure itself is backwards. Career growth sounds impressive on paper. Better titles, higher salaries, more responsibility, but very few people pause to ask an honest question. Where is this path actually taking me? A career can grow endlessly while life slowly shrinks. More meetings replace real conversations. More deadlines replace personal time. More responsibility replaces flexibility. What looks like progress from the outside often feels like confinement on the inside. Lifestyle design flips this thinking completely. Instead of asking what job should I get, it starts with what kind of life do I want to live? How do you want your mornings to feel? How much freedom do you want over your time? Where do you want to live, travel, or work from? How much stress are you willing to tolerate? These questions sound simple, but they are rarely asked because once you ask them, many traditional career paths stop making sense. One of the most radical ideas here is the concept of mini retirements. Society teaches us to suffer for decades and rest at the end. Lifestyle design challenges that logic. Why postpone freedom, exploration, and rest until your energy is gone? Many retirements are intentional breaks woven into life. Periods where work steps back and living steps forward, not as an escape, but as a reset. They allow learning, reflection, and growth in real time. Clears throat instead of compressing life into short vacations that barely recharge you. Another illusion lifestyle design exposes is balance. People chase work-life balance as if work and life are two equal enemies fighting for time. But balance assumes constant conflict. Design removes conflict. When work aligns with values and supports life instead of consuming it, balance becomes irrelevant. The goal is not equal hours. The goal is intentional days. Careers often reward loyalty and endurance. Lifestyle design rewards clarity and alignment. It asks you to remove unnecessary commitments instead of adding impressive ones. It encourages saying no to paths that look safe but feel wrong. And it shifts focus from pleasing systems to serving your own well-being. This can feel uncomfortable because society praises sacrifice. But sacrifice without purpose is just slow burnout. A powerful shift happens when you stop asking how to climb higher and start asking how to live better. You realize that more income doesn't automatically mean more freedom. Sometimes it means more dependence, more expectations, more golden handcuffs. Lifestyle design questions whether growth is actually growth or just expansion of responsibility. This approach doesn't reject work. It redefines its role. Work becomes a tool, not an identity. Income becomes support, not status. And success becomes something you feel, not something others applaud. When life is designed intentionally, work naturally adapts to fit into it, not dominate it. Once you experience even a small taste of this shift, the old model becomes harder to accept. You start noticing how many people are climbing ladders that are leaning against walls they never chose. And you realize that the real freedom isn't quitting work. It's choosing a life first and letting work serve that choice. We live in a world where information never stops. News updates every minute. Notifications vibrate nonstop. Social media feeds refresh endlessly. and everyone seems to believe that knowing more is the same as being smarter. But have you ever noticed that despite consuming so much information, most people feel more confused, more anxious, and less decisive than ever before? That's because information, when uncontrolled, doesn't create clarity. It creates noise. Most people assume ignorance is a weakness. They believe staying informed about everything is responsible and mature. In reality, this belief quietly destroys focus. The human brain was never designed to process constant input. When you flood it with headlines, opinions, and alerts, it stays in reaction mode. You're always responding, rarely thinking. And a reactive mind cannot design a deliberate life. Selective ignorance is not about avoiding knowledge. It's about choosing what deserves your attention and what does not. Not all information is useful, and not all useful information is relevant to your goals. The problem is that modern culture treats all information as urgent. News makes everything feel immediate. Social media makes everything feel important. But urgency is often manufactured, not real. Think about how much time people spend checking news that has zero impact on their personal decisions. Global events they can influence. Opinions they didn't ask for. Arguments that don't improve their lives. This constant exposure creates emotional fatigue and false stress. People feel busy mentally even when they haven't accomplished anything meaningful. When your attention is scattered, even simple tasks feel exhausting. Decision becomes harder. Creativity shrinks. Focus disappears. People then mistake this mental overload for laziness or lack of discipline. They try to fix it by pushing harder, when the real solution is subtraction, doing less, consuming less, reacting less. Selective ignorance works because it restores mental space. When you stop feeding your brain unnecessary inputs, it starts processing deeper thoughts again. Ideas connect. Priorities become clearer. You begin to notice what actually matters instead of what is loudest. Silence in this sense becomes productive. Another powerful idea connected to this is Parkinson's law. Work expands to fill the time you give it. Information works the same way. The more information you allow in, the more mental space it occupies, whether it's useful or not. When people constantly check emails, messages, and updates, they fragment their attention into tiny pieces. Deep thinking becomes impossible because the mind never stays still long enough. Selective ignorance also protects emotional energy. Media thrives on fear, outrage, and drama because those emotions keep attention hooked. But living in a constant emotional reaction state drains motivation and peace. When you reduce exposure, you don't become careless, you become calmer. And a calm mind makes better decisions than an anxious one. This doesn't mean disconnecting completely or living unaware of the world. It means setting rules, choosing specific times to consume information, limiting sources, asking a simple question before consuming anything. Will this improve a decision I need to make? If the answer is no, it's probably noise. Once you practice selective ignorance, something surprising happens. You don't fall behind. You move ahead. You gain clarity while others drown in updates. You act while others analyze endlessly. You focus while others scroll. And slowly your time and attention start working for you instead of against you. In a world addicted to information, the ability to ignore wisely becomes a superpower. Most people believe productivity means doing more. More tasks, more hours, more effort, more hustle. They measure their days by how full their schedules are and their worth by how exhausted they feel at night. But if being busy truly created success, everyone working nonstop would be fulfilled and free. The reality is the opposite. Busyness has become a disguise for poor focus. The problem starts with how people plan their work. To-do lists grow endlessly, filled with tasks that feel urgent but rarely move life forward. Completing them gives a temporary sense of progress, but very little actually changes. People end the day tired, not because they worked on what mattered, but because they worked on everything. True productivity begins with elimination. Instead of asking, "What should I add?" the more powerful question is, "What can I remove?" Most results come from a very small number of actions. Yet, people spend the majority of their time maintaining low-value tasks that exist simply because they've always been done that way. Meetings that don't need to happen, emails that don't need replies, processes that don't need to exist. This is where the 80-20 principle becomes practical. A small percentage of actions produces most outcomes. A few clients generate most revenue. A few habits shape most of life. A few decisions create most stress or peace. Productivity is not about equal effort everywhere. It's about identifying the few things that truly matter and letting the rest go. Busy work feels productive because it's easy to start and easy to complete. High-impact work feels uncomfortable because it requires focus, thinking, and sometimes saying no. So people unconsciously choose activity over impact. They answer emails instead of creating. They attend meetings instead of deciding. They respond instead of designing. Another illusion is that longer hours equal commitment. In reality, long hours often signal unclear priorities. When boundaries are missing, work expands endlessly. Without deadlines, tasks stretch. Without clarity, everything becomes urgent. People then confuse exhaustion with importance. Measuring productivity by time spent is one of the biggest traps of modern work. Time does not equal value. 2 hours of focused, intentional work can create more results than 10 hours of scattered effort. But because time is visible and results are not always immediate, people default to measuring what's easy instead of what's meaningful. Elimination also applies to mental habits. Worrying about things you can't control, overthinking decisions that don't matter, seeking perfection where progress is enough. These patterns drain energy without producing value. Letting go of them is a form of productivity most people ignore. When you remove the unnecessary, something powerful happens. Focus deepens, energy increases, work becomes lighter, not heavier. You stop feeling chased by your schedule and start controlling it. Fewer tasks create better outcomes. Less effort creates more impact. Productivity at its core is not about discipline or motivation. It's about design. Designing systems that protect attention. Designing days that favor clarity. Designing work around results instead of appearances. Once you understand this, you stop trying to do everything and start doing what actually matters. Most people assume the only way to earn more is to work more. More hours, more effort, more stress. This belief feels logical, but it quietly traps people in a cycle where time becomes the price they pay for survival. When income is directly tied to hours, freedom becomes impossible. No matter how high the pay is, time is still limited. And once time runs out, so does income. The real shift happens when you separate income from time. Automation is not about laziness or shortcuts. It's about building systems that continue to function even when you step away. Most people don't lack skills or ideas. They lack systems. They rely on themselves for everything, which means their presence is always required. As long as you are the system, you can never escape it. Think about the difference between working hard and working smart. Working hard means constant effort. Working smart means designing once and benefiting repeatedly. Automation replaces repeated manual actions with processes. Instead of answering the same questions again and again, you create systems that answer them for you. Instead of performing tasks daily, you build structures that handle them automatically. One of the biggest mental barriers to automation is the belief that everything must be perfect before it can run on its own. People wait for the right time, more experience, or more confidence. In reality, systems improve by being used, not by being delayed. Automation doesn't require perfection. It requires clarity, clear steps, clear outcomes, clear roles. Another misconception is that automation only applies to large businesses or advanced technology. In truth, automation starts small. Simple processes, standard responses, delegated tasks, repeating patterns identified and removed from your personal workload. The goal is not to eliminate work completely, but to eliminate dependency on your constant attention. Systems create leverage. Leverage means one decision, one setup, or one process produces results multiple times. Without leverage, effort is linear. More work equals more output. With leverage, effort becomes exponential. A single well-designed system can outperform years of manual effort. Automation also forces a shift in identity. Instead of seeing yourself as a worker, you begin thinking like an architect. You stop asking, "How do I do this faster?" and start asking, "Why am I doing this at all?" Many tasks exist simply because no one questioned them. Once questioned, they disappear or become automated. Fear often shows up here. Fear of losing control. Fear that things will break without you. Fear that others won't do things your way. But control is expensive. It costs time, energy, and attention. Automation teaches you to trust systems instead of micromanaging every detail. And while systems may fail occasionally, the freedom they create far outweighs the risk. When income becomes independent of time, life changes dramatically. Rest stops feeling guilty. Breaks stop feeling dangerous. You gain the ability to step back and think instead of constantly reacting. Creativity increases because your mind isn't consumed by maintenance work. Opportunities become visible because you finally have space to see them. Automation is not about escaping responsibility. It's about placing responsibility where it belongs, into systems that work for you instead of against you. And once you experience even a small level of time-independent income, the idea of trading hours for money starts to feel outdated. you realize that true freedom isn't about working less. It's about no longer being required all the time. One of the biggest reasons people stay overwhelmed is not because they have too much work, but because they believe they must do everything themselves. There's a quiet pride in being needed, in being the person who holds everything together. But this pride comes at a cost: time, energy, and mental freedom. When you insist on doing everything, you become the bottleneck in your own life. Delegation feels uncomfortable because it forces you to confront control. Most people don't resist delegation because others are incapable. They resist it because letting go feels risky. What if the task isn't done perfectly? What if mistakes happen? What if someone else does it differently? But perfection is expensive, and in most cases it's unnecessary. When you do everything yourself, you're not saving time or money, you're spending it. Every task you handle personally carries an opportunity cost. While you're busy with low-value work, higher-value thinking, planning, and creative work gets postponed over time. This creates stagnation. Growth slows not because of lack of effort, but because effort is misplaced. Delegation is not about dumping work. It's about transferring responsibility with clarity. Clear instructions, defined outcomes, and simple systems matter more than talent. Most failures in delegation happen not because the other person is incapable, but because expectations were unclear. Once systems are in place, delegation becomes reliable. Another mental shift is understanding that buying time is often more valuable than saving money. People hesitate to delegate because they see it as an expense. But time once lost can never be recovered. Money, in contrast, can be earned again. When you exchange money for time, you're not losing. You're investing in freedom, focus, and long-term growth. Delegation also challenges identity. Many people feel important because they are busy. If they stop doing everything, they fear becoming replaceable. But being replaceable is not weakness, it's leverage. If something can't function without you, it gives you power. Power to step back, power to improve systems, power to focus on what truly matters. Letting go of control doesn't mean lowering standards. It means redefining them. Not everything needs to be done perfectly. Most things just need to be done well enough. The goal is effectiveness, not personal involvement. When you release the need to oversee every detail, mental space opens up. Delegation forces a long-term mindset. Short-term effort feels easier than training someone or building a system. But over time, systems outperform personal effort every single time. The initial discomfort of letting go is small compared to the lifelong benefit of reduced workload. Once you experience effective delegation, something changes internally. You stop measuring your value by how much you do and start measuring it by how well things run without you. Stress decreases, focus improves, decisions become clearer. You move from being trapped inside work to standing above it. True freedom doesn't come from doing everything better. It comes from no longer needing to do everything at all. Fear quietly controls more decisions than logic ever does. Not the obvious kind of fear, but the subtle fear of embarrassment, failure, uncertainty, and judgment. Most people don't avoid action because they are lazy. They avoid it because their mind exaggerates risk and minimizes potential reward. So, they stay where they are. Not because it's good, but because it's familiar. Traditional goal setting often ignores this reality. People set ambitious goals, feel inspired for a moment, and then slowly return to old patterns. Why? Because goals focus on what we want, not what scares us. Fear setting flips this approach. Instead of asking, "What do I want to achieve?" it asks, "What am I afraid will happen if I try?" This simple shift exposes how unrealistic most fears actually are. When you break fear down into details, its power weakens. Vague fear feels overwhelming. Specific fear becomes manageable. What is the worst-case scenario? What would it actually look like? How permanent would it be? Could it be reversed? In most cases, the consequences people imagine are far less catastrophic than they assume. And even when things go wrong, recovery is often faster than expected. Another overlooked cost is the cost of inaction. People carefully calculate the risks of trying, but rarely measure the damage of staying still. What happens if you don't change anything for 5 years, 10 years? The slow erosion of motivation, health, and self-respect often hurts far more than any temporary failure. Regret compounds quietly. Fear-setting trains the mind to see action as a process, not a cliff. Instead of leaping blindly, you test, adjust, and learn. Small experiments replace life-altering bets. This reduces emotional pressure and builds confidence naturally. Progress feels safer when it's structured. Most fears are social, not physical. Fear of looking foolish, fear of disappointing others, fear of being judged. But these fears assume people are paying close attention, which they rarely are. Everyone is busy managing their own insecurities. Realizing this creates freedom. You stop living for imagined observers. Fear setting also restores perspective. It reminds you that discomfort is temporary, but avoidance can last a lifetime. Courage doesn't mean the absence of fear. It means moving forward with clarity despite it. When fear is named, measured, and challenged, it loses its authority. Over time, this practice rewires decision M. You stop asking what if it fails and start asking what if it works? And even more importantly, what if I do nothing? That question alone has the power to break stagnation. The people who build meaningful lives are not fearless. They are simply trained to act before fear talks them out of it. At some point, many people realize that their exhaustion isn't coming from work alone. It's coming from a life that never truly pauses. Rest has been rebranded as laziness and constant. Activity is praised as ambition. In this environment, slowing down feels irresponsible even when the body and mind are clearly asking for it. The result is a culture where people are always tired yet rarely fulfilled. Work slowly becomes more than a source of income. It turns into identity. People introduce themselves by what they do, measure their worth by productivity, and feel uneasy when they're not busy. When rest appears, guilt follows. The mind whispers that time should be used, optimized, monetized. Stillness starts to feel dangerous. But rest is not the opposite of work. It's the foundation of meaningful work. Without rest, creativity fades. Decision weakens. Motivation becomes forced. Many people think they need more discipline when what they actually need is recovery. True rest restores clarity, not just energy. Modern work also distorts meaning. When days are filled with tasks that don't align with personal values, people disconnect emotionally. They function, but they don't feel alive. Meaning doesn't come from being busy. It comes from intention, from knowing why you do what you do. When work supports life instead of consuming it, effort feels lighter. Freedom introduces responsibility. When people gain time, they sometimes feel lost. Structure disappears and with it excuses. This is why many unconsciously prefer being busy. Business provides direction. True freedom requires self-awareness. It asks, what actually matters to me? That question can feel uncomfortable, but it's essential. Separating identity from occupation is one of the most liberating shifts a person can make. You are not your job. You are not your productivity. Work is something you do, not who you are. Once this separation happens, choices become clearer. You stop tolerating work that drains you simply because it defines you. Meaningful work doesn't have to be grand. It has to be aligned. When actions match values, even simple work feels purposeful. When they don't, even success feels empty. This is why chasing external validation often leads to internal dissatisfaction. Redefining work, rest, and meaning is not about rejecting ambition. It's about humanizing it. It's about designing a life where energy flows instead of being constantly drained. Where rest is respected, work is intentional, and meaning is felt daily, not postponed for someday. When life stops being a constant sprint, presence returns. And in presence, clarity grows. Eventually, every idea reaches a point where inspiration must turn into application. It's easy to feel motivated while listening, nodding along, imagining a different life. But real change doesn't happen in imagination. It happens in integration. This philosophy was never meant to help you escape reality. It was meant to help you engage with it more intentionally. Living outside the system doesn't mean quitting your job overnight, rejecting responsibility, or becoming reckless. That misunderstanding keeps many people from even trying. The truth is this approach is about reducing dependency, not burning bridges. It's about creating options. When you have options, you gain power. Not power over others, but power over your own time, energy, and direction. Most people think freedom requires extreme moves. In reality, it often starts with small redesigns, questioning unnecessary commitments, removing tasks that drain energy without adding value, setting boundaries when none existed before, testing ideas instead of fantasizing about them. Progress here is quiet, not dramatic. The mistake many make is trying to copy someone else's version of freedom. But freedom is personal. For some, it means more travel. For others, it means more time with family. For some, it means creative space. For others, it means peace of mind. The goal is not to follow a template. It's to design intentionally. This approach also demands realism. Systems take time to build. Habits take time to change. Fear doesn't disappear overnight. But clarity compounds. Each small improvement creates space for the next. Each decision made consciously weakens the pull of autopilot living. One of the most powerful shifts happens when you stop reacting and start choosing. You stop asking what's expected of me and start asking what actually makes sense for my life. That question alone filters out noise, pressure, and comparison. It brings decisions back to alignment instead of approval. There will always be reasons to delay. Bills, opinions, responsibilities, uncertainty. Those don't disappear. What changes is how much control they have over you. When you design systems instead of surviving days, you move from endurance to intention. This isn't about working less just to relax more. It's about creating a life where effort feels meaningful, rest feels earned, and time feels respected. Where you're not constantly waiting for permission to live fully. Where life is happening now, not scheduled for later. And the most important realization is this. You don't need to change everything at once. You just need to stop ignoring the fact that another way exists. Awareness is the first exit. Choice is the second. Action is the third. If you found value in this journey, then like the video and subscribe to my channel. Audiobook library for more such deep explorations that challenge the way you think, work, and live.